live now. So it's just loading. So we're streaming now, I believe. We'll just wait for it. Hello, everyone who can see us. We are just doing the Facebook share. And that was super quick. So we are now live. So would you like to see if you can share from my page now?
Let me check. Going back to your page.
Us guys, see you popping on there.
I see us. Yeah, I see us. I just share now.
Good evening. Yes, good morning for me.
Good afternoon for me. Hi, Natasha.
Alrighty, we're all ready to go?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So welcome to everyone who joins us, and for anyone who ends up watching the replay as well, please do feel free to comment if you are watching the replay at a different time, and we can both get back to you. So I am super excited. This is such an amazing topic, and I am so grateful to be connecting with Ute today, and just the discussion I think will be really, really valuable. So I am just going to read out your bio because it's really lovely. So today we're going to be talking about the special bond between children and animals, and I just think it's so valuable. And I think not even just between children, but also adults as well. They play such a special part in our journey, and they just have such an amazing energy as well, right? So this will bring so much insight for a lot of people. So thank you for being here with us. So you facilitate the bond between animals and people, and you have a website called Pets Point of View. So that link has been posted, but we'll post it again. And your role is a holistic healing coach for animals, a senior pet specialist, a pet death doula, and an animal communicator. And your work is very deeply spiritual and transformative, and it's a mission that inspires you every day. And I absolutely love that. So without any more delay, I'll hand over to you. Would you like to speak a little bit just around how you got into this, and a little bit about the background and a little bit about what you do? And I really would like to kind of maybe start with talking about your role as a death doula and some of those aspects, because I do think that's often a big part that's missing, is how people deal with the death of an animal. If you feel that that's aligned, to jump straight into that, but I think that's a really great discussion.
Yeah, you can jump into anything right away. I'd like to start just a tiny bit before we get to death. As I told you when we had other conversations, I worked with children as a teacher for many, many years. And when I look at children, one of my jobs, I feel, is to try to really understand why they act the way they act when I feel this is weird or I don't get it, right? And when they're really young, it's not necessarily verbal. And in essence, I feel that I could translate this approach, being open and curious and receptive, to animals, because I have to even learn more to read between the lines, so to speak, because obviously they don't speak human language. Okay, so, and when I started working with animals, I thought, what would I do with a toddler who doesn't understand what I say? What would I do with a dog that doesn't understand what I say? So this is how I feel I could marry those two things in my life that I'm so passionate about. You know, I want to support parents with their kids, and I want to support humans with their animals. And you asked me to jump right into death. So let me see how I do.
Only if that feels right.
It's totally fine. You know, we just roll with it. So when people come and want to work with me, there are one of two issues. One, strange behaviors, and people have all kinds of interpretations, or there is illness and people are really stressed out because there's an impending death. And we often have also other family members that are involved, other pets in the house, children in the house, extended relatives, partners, ex-partners, you name it. You know, there's a whole mix going on. And when I work with people and they are really wanting to explore what it means for them when there is an impending death or an illness that, as we know now, we cannot reverse, such as cancer, so far at least, right? Then I say, okay, there are two really big events in life, and every parent understands at least one. And the one event is birth, the other is death, right? And there are similar processes. There is birth labor, as you well know, being a mom, and there is also death labor. With animals, that is sometimes abbreviated because we often have a planned death, such as euthanasia. But I say these are the biggest events that we can encounter as human beings on the planet right now. Everything in between is either entertainment or drama, and we have to do things about that. We go to workshops, we do therapy, or we do whatever we need to do. And I don't mean to poo-poo that, but I really think the great transformation happens when you give birth and you encounter death, right? And most of us encounter the death of a companion animal. And I use the term and refer mainly to dogs and cats. And we have more companion animals depending on where we live. Most of us encounter that before our own death. You know, there are animals that survive people. It's a different topic. But a lot of us, when we have a dog, a cat, or several animals, we will encounter death. How do we deal with this? And how do we model for our children what we can do? How can we treat this without making it pretty or ugly or non-existent? How can we be authentic? And I also, when I use the word authentic, it means something for me. The way I am authentic and the way you are with your child is how you are authentic. So I think we each have our own flavor, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and there's a lot, you know, we might get into a lot more discussion about that, but I also think that since we are talking about children here and the animal bond and that the bond that children have with animals, I should say, I am all for being very transparent. That doesn't mean we, you know, divulge gory details or so. I'm all for being really transparent. I am all for making the assumption that a child has a gut instinct and also an intuition about what's happening. And so do animals. They can and collaborate with us as well. And for everybody here who listens, who likes animal communication, when I use the word choice, collaborate, thinking, feeling about animals, I do not treat them as humans, but I do believe there's an intelligence that we haven't even begun to understand.
I agree.
Around.
And thank you for saying around the intuition that we have with them and them with us, because I think that's a really big part. There is a lot going on there, and I think there's a lot going on there, and you might be able to talk to this as well, around the communication that I see between my daughter and other children with animals that I don't really even understand that it's happening. And it is incredible, you know, and it's almost telepathic, you know, like I really,
it is,
you know, do think that there is a lot going on there that isn't potentially seen from the human eye, as, you know, for lack of a better way of explaining it. I mean, I know in our field, we know there's a lot that does go on in that aspect, but for people that may not be so familiar with the intuition and telepathic. Yeah.
You know, I feel, you know, we're all coming into this world when we are born in this lifetime, and we're just really open, you know. When we look at younger children, what we talk about when we have to do workshops to learn about it, it's real. They see fairies, they see nature spirits. There is an extra sensory perception that I have to uncover as an adult, because, you know, we get stuffed with all kinds of intellectual stuff, and there's a place for all of that. And I find as an adult, it's important that I model appropriate body language so that we don't clobber the dog, don't clobber the cat, you know, which is more like we need to learn about what's appropriate. And that being said, when I am working with young children, and you know, my dogs are celebrities here in my neighborhood. I have dogs right now, and they're very popular because unlike a lot of little dogs, they're actually really friendly around children. A lot of little dogs are like, you know, I'm not a purr stop, leave me alone. I'm like, okay, cool. If you let me lick your face, I'm game. And so it's really, really, really nice. And I use that as an opportunity to just say, you know, Mila likes to be scratched under her chin, you know, because we always go like this. But also when it is more serious, you know, when a family is dealing with an illness, you know, and the dog is really old. So for example, or the cat is really old. I sometimes then say to a child, what do you think Mila is thinking right now? What do you think? You know, and I'm getting the most poetic answers. I couldn't come up with that, you know, or I have children who say, I know what Esme is thinking. I know. And I'm like, do you? Tell me, because I have to really work to do that. You know, because I'm really intuitive, but I'm also an adult, right? And I love that. I love that when we can share this. This is magic. You know, for me, that's applied magic. And I experience this with my animals too. And they get on my nerves, like children can get on our nerves too, right? I mean, it's, but as long as I keep that channel in me open, that connects me with the magic, I can have all the helpers here in my neighborhood, all the kids who say, how is Mila doing today?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it's really awesome. And my dogs think it's so cool, you know, because they are kind of secretly also looking when the child smells like a treat. I don't always divulge that, but that's okay too, you know. Hey, come on.
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
Come on.
Can you explain a little bit around how you have addressed a pet or impending death of a pet in a family, and maybe some of the suggestions that you give families would be amazing?
Absolutely, my favorite topic. Regardless of the family configuration, when we have what I call the luxury of a diagnosis, as in we have a name or we have kind of a condition, which it has a predictable outcome eventually that results in death, as far as we know. You know, miracles are always possible. And as of now, there are certain illnesses that are predictably leading to the death of the physical body. And I encourage anybody to really look into rituals that are meaningful to them. It doesn't have to be religious, it can be. But when you look at every culture all over the globe, whether it's tribal, it's civilized, it's Western, it's Eastern, it's, I don't know what it is, there are rituals for the dead, prior, during, after, and it varies. And I say, think about something that is meaningful. Anything. It can be serious, it can be new agey, it can be with crystals, and it can be funny and silly. It really doesn't matter. Because the worst thing that can happen is, since most animals are dying by lethal injection, you know, there are situations when they die naturally, but that's the statistic, is that most of them die as what I call it a scheduled death. Think about how you can make it a sacred experience, the grief and the sorrow and everything that's involved. So, and that being said, I worked with a number of families who were terrified because the children were little. The dog or the cat was the it thing. It was like, you know, the dog and the cat has seen the children be born, grow up, crawl, walk, talk, and all of this. And I find that we really can include children. And again, it has to feel right to the parent. We are not trying to create something artificial because someone says so, right? And for example, I work with one family, and Zoe, the family dog, she died at the good old age of 15. She was a big dog. And the children at the time, two little girls, were 5 and 7 years old. And mom was really anxious because Zoe was there before she married. So Zoe was her first soulmate, and then she married, and then she had her children, right? We talked about what she could do, and then the children designed a box for Zoe. So in their family, the word heaven really worked for them. So I'm using that, and there might be other descriptions, and I really don't care as long as it feels good and right, and there is something, and it's not just like, it's all cut off. And to this day, I could cry about this. It was so beautiful. These are tears of being touched, So they drew pictures for Zoe. They drew pictures for her. They got a big key so that Zoe could unlock the gates to heaven.
Oh, I love that.
She had to have treats. She had to have treats. So you do not go to heaven without treats. So they had this whole beautiful box for Zoe with drawings and making sure, and some of her favorite toys, like an old shoe bone and an old whatever rope toy. And so they prepared this, right? And then they went, and then they said goodbye. The family did an in-home euthanasia. The kids were in bed when the veterinarian came. So they really very carefully prepared this. It was amazing. And so the kids had everything prepared. They had said goodbye and say, goodbye, Zoe. And Zoe is gonna go to heaven. That was like for this family. And I think a really great example. And and then Zoe died. The next day, the kids went to grandpa, and Zoe's mom and her partner, they brought Zoe to the cremation place. And a week later, there was a golden package on the porch from Zoe. These ashes had arrived from heaven. I mean, I love that package. I want to have a golden package. So, but there was this, the children had prepared. There was a message from Zoe, and then they took her ashes. And this is a family who likes to camp and hike. And they took the ashes and spread the ashes in different areas that Zoe liked to go to. This is just one example. I know of other families who have made scrapbooks. I like to take photos. I do visuals. And people had parties for the dog and for the cat with the favorite foods and the colors. And I say, if you recruit children as helpers to help their dog, it is really a whole lot less morbid than we might think. Yeah. And I remember I saw Ruby, the oldest, a few weeks later, and I said, hey, how are you doing? She says, I'm fine. 7 years old, you're really cool. And then she said, you know what happened to Zoe? I said, yes. There was not that awareness how much I had helped mom, and that's totally perfect and fine. And she said, you know where she went? I said, where did she go? She said, she went to heaven. There is this, it was complete for Ruby.
Yeah.
Was okay for Ruby. And then she said, and I miss her. Yeah.
And that's okay too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can miss and cry and think sad thoughts and wonder what's going on in heaven where you can't drive to. But when you acknowledge all of that, it's okay, because grief is okay too. It's not anything that needs to be cured. Yeah. It just needs to be
exactly
as long as it wants to be at the table.
Yes.
This is just one example of something that was so beautiful, and I felt so honored. They designed all of this. I made suggestions. I said, think about this, think about that. And she said, oh yeah. And then they were much more brave than I thought they would be.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love that. And, I think it's really important, as you say, and in my, from my perspective and opinion as well, is to really be open and honest with children. And I think I don't. So let me think about how I'm going to say this. So, often children can take responsibility for things that aren't theirs to take responsibility for. And what I mean about that is, when we shifted at the start of the year, our cat went missing, and it was over Christmas, New Year's, and so there were lots of people coming and going between holidays. And I felt pretty certain with, my intuition kind of tuning in that he was still alive and he was about. And I felt he was stuck somewhere. But my daughter was on holiday with her dad and had come back home, and we hadn't found him yet. And we kind of pulled into the driveway, and almost the first thing she does every time is, what other cats inside? Have you seen them? And I had to say, hun, like, Theo's been missing for a couple of days. And the first thing she said, she burst into tears, which made me cry. But, the first thing she said was, oh, but Mum, but he loves me. And in that was, yes, he does, but also there was some of that was actually almost like, but how could he love me and leave me? What have I done? It was almost like she could almost be like, but he loves me. So what's happened, and why has he left me? And that was a really kind of made me think, well, how do I address this? And we did speak about it, but the other thing also was, we printed flyers, and she was the one that came with me and put them in the letter boxes. And, I think a lot of that involvement is really important as well. But it was an interesting thing, which I thought I'd mention, because I'd love to hear what you think about that, around just that something in her tone of actually not that she thought it was her fault, but why has he left me type.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Animals going missing is the hardest thing, because sometimes you have closure, as in they come back or you find them, and sometimes you don't. And I think what I would do instinctively when a child approaches me, I would say, what do you sometimes do when you get scared? Some children want to hide, or they want to be under the blankie, right? So I would, probably try to explain, sometimes we do things when we're really, really, really scared, and we cannot do anything else, right? So it isn't I find it honestly difficult to give a satisfying answer. And I would validate, yes, he loves you, but when you are a cat, that's what cats tend to hide. They really do.
Yeah.
Dogs are more like us. They might go begging from door to door if they're socialized, because, So, and again, I would say to a child, and, it's easier actually to say that, for me, it's easier to say to a child, yes, he loves you and he is scared and he is someplace hiding in the blank. What can we do to let him know that we love him? What is it that we can do? Light a candle, make a drawing, or say, I love you.
They're great options. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And this goes, when you and I look at being examples, love is love, not always have an expectation. And it's tough, right? I don't wish that on anyone when animals get lost, and it does happen, and I would not say, oh yeah, it's in a better place and all of this. What do I know? And unless I have a really good feeling it's a better something, I won't say any of that, because it's a lie, right?
Exactly.
But saying, I miss him too. What can we do to let him know we love him? Because he can feel that, even if he or she is too scared to come home.
And that's what I learned. I didn't realize this until I started looking into it, because I hadn't lost an animal before. I've had death of animals, but But they do, don't they? The cats, especially when they're scared, they shut down and they go quiet and they won't necessarily answer, even if they're very close to home. So it's even harder to find them because when they are scared, they they close in.
Yeah. You know, there is a thing, and I've counseled a lot of people on that. And by the way, if anybody hears this and you have a missing pet, send me a message. I have a document on some things you could do that, you know, I'm happy to share that. It's because it's not my personal, it's just some things people can do. And when I talk to people about cats, notorious for, you know, they can be invisible and usually hiding not that far away, but we can't find them. And then I say to adults, but for children, it's easier. I say, think like a cat. Yell and they come, you know, when, you know, or when some cats are conditioned to react to a treat, the sound of a treat, you know, kibble or something like that. But think like a cat. Let's crawl. Seriously, you know, you find them sometimes on their porches, you know, and at the very least, if we, and this is not to entertain your child, think like a cat means you're on all fours. You don't walk around and say, hey, Fluffy, I loves you. And Fluffy is like, I'm a, you know, but there are, you know, it's, and cats go into instinct mode much more readily, you know, but I think thinking like a cat, children are smaller. Yeah, I had a situation, it's not a cat, but I have a little handicapped parrot here in my house. And we have an aviary in my backyard. And a few years ago, some strange people cut a hole into my fence and opened the aviary, and my parrot was gone.
Without understanding
they didn't. I hope she bit them really hard. I don't wish harm, but I thought they deserved to be bitten. But what nobody knew is that she doesn't know how to fly because she's crippled. The kids in my neighborhood, I had to bribe them and say, you get a lot of ice cream. They were, I'm like, okay with that. They found her. And she was totally frozen in shock. You know, I found her too, but I was really happy that they found her. It was really good. They had a dog that got injured a few weeks earlier, and they could find my parrot and feel good about themselves. And that we found her, she wouldn't have survived. But like, okay, we are scouring, and they had long afternoon. I said, ice cream. You know, and it was a really, you know, and even without ice cream, you know, there is this nobleness that we all have. And when I ask a child to help me with something, most children,
they love it.
Unless it's the dishes or something.
It depends what age they are. My daughter loves helping with anything.
Yeah.
Do people come to you for, you know, intuitive messages to either for past pets, but also for lost pets, so you can reassure them that they may be okay? Is that something that you work with?
I work with a lot of pets that are dead. I mean, on the other side, call it what you want. With lost pets, I am very careful. I do often work with lost pets and open the channels for the person, because we are so frantic that we push so much energy out. I have worked with animals that were lost and died, and I could feel that. I really am very careful to reassure anyone whose pet is lost. People are not in their most receptive mode, and I don't blame them for that. You know, so reassuring, I only do that when I have valid reasons to do so. And that is not necessarily in the tangible, but when someone is lost, I am treating that with great caution, because I don't want anyone to have any expectations.
False hope. Yeah.
It's toxic and doesn't help anyone.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so tell me some of the examples that people work with you in regards to just being able to better communicate with animals. I've had some work done myself, and I've had some amazing reasons why my cats have been acting the way they have, you know. And I do feel like sometimes, even though I know, you know, I kind of think, oh, I could do it myself, and I probably should, but it's sometimes you get in the way emotionally, you know, and that's, you know, I
course.
really feel that we're all here to help each other with the gifts that we have, even though we may be capable of doing some of this ourselves if we sit with it and learn. But, you know, sometimes those emotions do get in the way, and it's really nice to be able to call on people such as yourself who have such a strong bond with animals in the intuitive sense as well, and have learned to understand them so well, to kind of say, hey, I've got this, you know, animal that's acting this way, and can you help me? Do you have a couple of stories, or do you want to talk a little bit around how people or can approach you or other animal communicators for that type of scenario?
Oh yeah, people can approach me by setting up a time to talk with me, right? So I can do it. I work with people all over the world, so that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Right? So was your question how they approach me, or
So
what?
just in general, like what are some of the stories that you may be able to share around, you know, you probably got a lot, but you know, like people might be curious around, you know, how you can help, or someone who is an animal communicator can help, or yeah, just stories around, you know, animals that haven't been, because I find some of the stories I've heard have been fascinating, and they're often not what we think the reason is. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So let me tell you a story that is really funny in a way, and this was many years ago. So I have a lot of stories to tell. We want to just select some juicy ones here. And I just want to also just validate what you said. It's often not what we think it is, because we project our human ideas of what it is, you know, especially when we get stressed or we are disappointed and we have expectations, you know. But a few years ago, a woman contacted me, and this was about the impending death of her dog, a big old dog. And she just wanted to make sure she's doing right by her dog. And a lot of people approached me for that reason. And complete stranger, had never talked to me before, was willing to do a session. And the dog had lived a long, good life. She had already scheduled a house call with a veterinarian for a few days after the session. She just wanted to make sure, am I in alignment? Am I doing right by my dog? So, and I tune into the dog, big old Akita, and I'll never forget this. And the dog shows me images, and I'm like, oh my God, if I share this with this woman, she thinks I'm a nutcase. And then I'm like, what? I have to speak the truth, even if it's weird. And so first of all, I could confirm with her that her dog was completely ready to die. She was like, yes, this is all really great. And the first thing the dog showed me is, so I think we talked on a Thursday, and the euthanasia was on the following Monday in the backyard. And the dog said, great, my favorite spot, awesome. And not that dogs talk like that. I'm just translating right now. And then the dog said, please don't be too somber. Please. Okay. I am really complete. I'm good. I'm okay, but don't make it into this. So, and I said this in a very gentle way. And she says, oh, that's my dog. She is so, she has her ducks in a row. And then I said, you know, I don't know whether this makes sense to you at all, but I have to disclose to you some of the other information that I received, and then we can decipher what that means. And honestly, the dog had shown me a beer keg, and I'm like, yeah, hot dogs, that makes sense, you know? And then I said, and then there's a product here in the United States, Spam, which is like, it's a processed meat product, okay? So in a can. And I said, it seems like your dog wants to have a backyard barbecue with beer and Spam and hot dogs. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? This is like an end of life animal communication session. And she says, that's interesting, because my sister was going to come from out of town. We were going to have a barbecue. Oh no, my dog is dying. We shouldn't. And the dog is like, yeah. Tell Birdie. So it was, you know, I was like, when I tell this woman the dog shows me beer, I might ruin my reputation, right? Oh, this is so amazing. And then she called her sister, and basically on that Sunday before the euthanasia, they had this beautiful backyard picnic. And her dog got all kinds of food that she normally doesn't get. And then there was this moment for me. So first of all, I got confirmation it had been in the field, you know, stranger, never worked with me before. And then 2 weeks after our session, she sends me a photo. And again, I'm about to cry. It was so beautiful. She sends me a photo with her box, with her dog's ashes next to a completely mutilated and chewed up can of Spam.
Aww. Isn't it beautiful?
Yes. So that's just one story, you know, where we think, oh, it is sad. It is this. Yes. And she missed her dog, but she also, it was right.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important. I've had, I look back now and I had to put down, make a decision about a very old horse that I had that could no longer eat. And one consideration that, at the time, I mean, I was, I don't know, early 20s maybe, just if I was lucky. I know I had another very young horse, and I can't remember if we'd spoken about this through discussions, but the thing that I found really hard was, and this is, something I think is really important to think about with the other animals in the house when this happens, or, family, take a dog to another family member's dog and there's a bond there as well, is not having even told or even whether it was spoken out loud or communicated with my other horse about what was happening. And when this, the old horse was the first horse I ever got when I was very little. I was very lucky, a little black pony. She was beautiful. She was 24 when we got her, and I was like 12 or something, so she had done a really good number of years, and she got taken away alive in a horse float, and I was able to say goodbye to her, and that's great for closure. But and I wasn't aware back then, really around communicating with animals around what's happening, and I just feel now, even now, like I would just to be able to have spoken to my other horse around what was happening and why, because she just stood at the furthest point in the paddock where the horse truck left. And I think she knew, I do honestly think she knew why the horse was leaving.
Of
but,
course.
She was so hard to ride after that for so long. We spent a lot of time with her, but it's not necessarily around just the humans, the owners, right? It's other animals as well that are, that are affected by this as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, when we have a situation with small pets, horses are so intuitive, I worship.
They are.
Seriously, I worship horses. I worship other pets too, but horses are special, and they have helped us for so many years. But I think it's really helpful if people can do it, logistically speaking, that the other animals are there, and don't make them do anything. My cats, they witnessed so many old dogs die, and they were like, yeah, we've done that many times in ancient Egypt, It's like they were like, oh yeah, whatever, we do our thing. And then I had death here in my house where a bonded pair died within days of each other, old bonded dog pair. And the dog husband, my male dog, he watched when my female dog died, and he really see her. And I would have, I wouldn't have excluded anyone anyways, but she was fearless. She was completely fearless. And she says, this is how you do this. I'm not afraid. And he was like, oh, yeah. So, and we tend to talk about animals, about what we're going to do to them, what we're doing with them. And I'm saying, good, talk to them. Don't they understand human language, but they get your vibration, they get your frequency, they get the flavor of what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Talk to them. Talk to my pets when we have a euthanasia, and I let everybody hang around and do the thing. I make sure to tend to them after their companion leaves. You know, the body is taken away, or we had some burials in my backyard with some beautiful music and all of that. I do all kinds of things, and the neighbors, I don't know what they think, and it's okay, right?
Doesn't matter what they think. Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Woman digging holes in her yard, and I'm like, yeah. So it's just you know, and animals grieve. They grieve, you know. And we can do things for our grief. Do something for your animals too. You do not, you know, there's this belief system, especially with dogs, they have to toughen it out. Otherwise, you condition them to become codependent or whatever. And I'm like, no. Would you leave your child by herself in a corner when she scrapes her knee or loses her friend? The friend moves across the country. No. You know, so there are things where you can tend to your animals and comfort them, you know, or do special things with them. Or it's like when my dog Shiva died, he had a girlfriend, a dog girlfriend.
Just to clarify that, yeah.
Just to clarify. I was his wife. I was his person. But Sarah lived with my best friend. And we had a ceremony for my dog Shiva at Sarah's house. And Sarah and Shiva, they loved each other. You know, I mean, they were connected really deeply. And I took Shiva's old stinky comforter that he laid on the last few days of his life, and stinky in terms of he was really sick and there was a lot of body odor, and it was not the time to do anything about that. And we took that comforter and I had his ashes and we placed it in the room where we had the ceremony, and Sarah plopped herself on that comforter. I said to my friend, I'll leave that here. It has his scent. It has his energy. This is where he died. He slept on this for 2 weeks. And I think this is brilliant, really. You know, I suggested to people also, when you leave your pets alone, leave a stinky shirt at home. Scent is like, You know, we don't go to Bath and Beyond to get shampoo. We smell what smells strongly, right? And there are other things that we can do, but I think, yeah, comforting our animals, even if we can't make it go away, because it's not fixing things. It's just acknowledging you in your own way miss your friend.
Absolutely.
It is a thing. It's not just me projecting, it's a thing.
Yeah. And I think these conversations are really important. You know, sometimes I do feel that, you know, on channels like this, we're preaching to the converted. But, you know, like, for lack of a better way to say that, you know, that, you know, I think, and there was something I will touch on in a minute that we've talked about in conversation as well, which I think is really interesting in a minute, but, you know, it's almost an alignment with me around how we are communicating now with our children, like seeing them as real individual sovereign beings. And it's the same with animals. Like it's removing that need to feel like we can be in control of them because they feel sometimes like they are controllable. You know, like humans sometimes feel like, or even adults to children, like we're the superior, and so therefore you do as I say. And yes, there needs to be some agreements there, and, you know, with children as well, they need to, you know, I don't like the word boundaries, but, you know, agreements is to make them feel safe, and, you know, they need help. They often can't do things for themselves, and, you know, buying food and all that kind of thing, like with animals. But we really need to, and I feel quite strongly around really just encompassing, and many people do feel like the animal is very much part of their family, but it's also about that respect and not feeling like we need to control them and allowing them to be. And there was something that we talked about previously, which I did write down, was, so there were two things that you said which you can speak to would be amazing, was like, how do we, like the tools for better understanding the animals, I think was one of the things you said, like we need to step into really better understanding the animals ourselves. Do you want to speak a little bit to that? Is there tools that you found that help people, You know, like I believe that, you know,
Yeah,
I do believe that my cats can understand what I'm saying, and I don't necessarily think that they translate word for word the
right,
English.
right.
And you were saying that you had a dog or cat that only responded to German. Was that right?
My German cats.
Yeah. And it was probably choice, I feel, as well. Like, I'm not responding to English, I'm German.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that wasn't, I started speaking German with two of my cats, and there were the German cats, and then we had an American cat moving in. And I think it's like when you do there's research when children hear languages, they can also discern whether it's their own or whether it's a different language. I just think that we have expectations in particular of dogs and horses. Cats are a little bit harder to control.
Mm.
Yeah, and also more misunderstood for that reason, because you can't read expressions as readily and you can't just drill them in the same way. Or, you know, I know people who do clicker training with cats, and my cats were like, excuse me, no, you know, and I'm like, sure, you know, sure, I work, yeah, whatever. So say, especially with dogs and also with horses, we have these expectations they have to obey. And I'm all for good dog training. You know, I'm not against training. I think it's important, like you teach your child to use a knife and a fork and not just stick it in the eye. And I am able to sit and to have some impulse control. And that being said, I think we have often unrealistic expectations based on the paradigm that we are in charge and we are the alpha. It's all of this stuff, you know, and that may be true. I don't want to discourage anybody to, you know, you need to see what is right for you. However, you know, I see a lot of people get I want to say almost violent, you know, not violent in the sense of it, but there is a pushy energy. Why aren't you nicer to my neighbor or to the whatever, you know? And I'm like, okay, Natasha, when I come to your house, we might like each other enough to give each other a hug. Do I jump on your lap and lick your face? No. And I mean, this sounds kind of funny, but
yeah, it's true. We have an expectation, right?
Do I roll around on the floor with your daughter right away? No, you know, and there are people that I wouldn't even hug, and I still would be nice and polite and all of that. And I'm like, who on earth are we to think that our dogs are supposed to like everybody, that our horses are supposed to do everything we want them to do, because they're a very expensive commodity for a lot of people, right? And like a car. And I'm like, no, it's one of the most sensitive creatures on the planet. Come on, people, right? And I'm like, I don't like everybody. I don't feel drawn to everybody. Why should my dog? You know, they might have preferences. And so that is one thing. And then the other thing is also that we misunderstand some of the things that make animals feel unsafe. It's a whole topic about being on leash versus being off leash, being overwhelmed in the dog park, like me being in the mall. Oh God, it doesn't work for me, right? And I'm like, dear humans, modify what you believe and really look at who it is you have in front of you. When you and I talked the first time, I said, you know, when you have more than one child, you sometimes wonder, how did they come out so differently? DNA combination, why are they so different, right? And then we might have a certain expectation of dogs or a dog breed. And I'm like, I'm as we speak here. So I want to just say that to people who are up in arms here, maybe dog trainers and the likes, but modify your expectations and really see what can your dog process with his or her nervous system like a child.
Yes.
When your daughter throws a tantrum because she hurt her knee or she throws a tantrum, it might not be the best time to sit her down and say, honey, let's talk. Right? And I'm like, I need to meet you where you're at. That's my desire that I can. And it takes awareness, right? And I need to meet the animals where they're at. And then I can work.
Yeah.
And then I can employ skills or acquire skills. And that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, you've actually just, I hadn't thought of that. You're absolutely right. So when a dog is having a moment, whether it's with another dog or whatever, it is exactly, I've just made that a click. So thank you. You know, like you can't talk to a child that's having a complete meltdown, but I haven't really thought about that association with the animal that might be upset, or, and often the owners are the ones trying to pull them back and getting them to listen. But actually, if anyone has children, you cannot talk to a child until they've calmed down, or even a human, right? A adult, right? Like you need that space to kind of step back. But it's actually a really good perspective I hadn't thought of before with animals.
I mean, I want to just say loud and clear, we need to keep them safe. We pull them, it's to keep them safe. We don't just work it out. No.
Yeah.
Keeping them safe is different than expecting my dog to have it all together when they are in arousal. You know, and again, it's a very simplistic picture that I'm painting here. I guess the bottom line is for me, look who it is you are sharing your life with. Try to be aware and mindful. You do the best you can, but don't just throw all of these blanket ideas on how it's supposed to be because everybody, you know, Lassie on TV was like that. Well, that was a, you know, or, you know, it's just, and that for me is also having respect. You know, actually, I like that I cannot manipulate my cats. I like that. I like that I have to kind of figure out things in a different way.
Yeah, it's great. Now, one thing I'd really like you to talk about, and it was a really different perspective for me, and we might need to start wrapping up shortly, but I would like to really discuss this, is you said to me, you hadn't, it was your perspective on when people purposely acquire an animal to help a child. So there may be a child that is, I can't think of a word, but, like Asperger's or, and often people are told it's almost like pet therapy, but no, I don't want to cloud it with, other actual pet therapy. But when people acquire animals to serve a purpose for a child, and that particular animal doesn't know that that's the reason they've been inquired into the family, and just that dynamic around that, I'm probably not explaining that very well, but it was a really good perspective that you shared with me that I hadn't thought of before, because prior to us talking, I would have been all up for that, but you actually opened my mind with that. So I'd really like to share that with people.
Okay. It's a simple thing. There are sometimes, there are situations where people say, I want this particular dog breed, and then the dog is supposed to be an emotional support dog, for example, or the dog is supposed to do this and this and this. And there are dogs that are highly trained to facilitate emotional support or seizure activity. And I mean, there are dogs that are trained to do that. When people acquire a puppy, which is another child, by the way, and there is this preconceived notion, this dog is supposed to, I say, who is your dog? What's, what does your dog show you as you start training the puppy or training the dog or working with the dog? And and I've seen this also when I was in trainings, and this is not just for children, people, I mean, breeder dogs that were supposed to do this and this and this, and the dog was just a hot mess, because for whatever reason, it wasn't anyone's fault, but not every dog is equipped to do what you think the dog is supposed to do, unless you have data or you acquire a dog that has training in a certain area of that you need. I guess it comes again back to, don't prematurely project on what you need from the dog. Get a dog or get an animal because you love them. And when you love enough, they support you in some way. I guarantee
Exactly.
it. They
Yeah.
cannot do anything else, you know? They cannot, you know, and it's, again, it's very complex. It requires a lot from us. I think if we want to do it in a more aware way, but it's also really exciting.
Yeah.
It's really, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, have you got, so you just, I don't mean just, sorry, let me rephrase that. So do you coach people? So do you want to talk a little bit about what you do just to wrap up, and then we can, so I'll post the link to your website, but the main things that you do are more around the pet doula, which I love, but if people are struggling with trying to understand their animal, you can coach them, and you can do that via Skype and or Zoom or whatever you need to do.
Yeah. Mostly Zoom or phone. And I have a whole slew of questions that I sent them ahead of time. Essence, an intuitive session with some very hands-on recommendations. And this could be referring them to other practitioners, looking into other modalities that might support them at home, looking into natural remedies, and just getting a repertoire. Sometimes they might need to see a nutritionist. I mean, could be all kinds of things. And just widen the horizon of what is possible, right? So most of the sessions I do happen remotely on the phone. It's actually easier for me to tune in when I don't see an animal. There are situations here in my hometown where on occasion I do a behavior consult and I go to people's home, but that is the exception, and I do it, but most people, they have some issues that evolve around behavior that is connected with body stuff. And then how do we navigate that, and how do we work with everybody in the family and the practitioners that we have on board, and veterinarians and stuff like that.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's really good.
And so a lot of my work evolves around hospice support, preparing for death, and preparing the people for the death.
So valuable and so important. I love that. I love the work that you do. I'm just going to quickly scroll just to see if there's any specific questions here. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I'm just thrilled that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no specific questions. But if anyone does have any, just feel free to post them, and we can get back to you in the comments below. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so
thrilled.
so
lovely. Yes. Yeah, really valuable conversation, and
thank you.
It's just, I just love people that are working with animals and seeing them for what they are, and just
I have one more thing. Is it okay? One more thing. It's a lot of, there's people, I want to know. And I totally understand. And I just want to say, whoever you are, dear animal lover, anything you want to try on based on what you were inspired by, which hopefully you were, for me, being receptive is the golden doorway to any understanding. If I'm like, tell me what's going on, I'm like, no. But receptivity is the golden ticket. And there are many ways to get there. Meditation, dancing, walking, or just being quiet. That's the one more thing. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that we're finishing up on that. That's wonderful. Thank you. Great. So thank you so much. And yeah, we'll talk again really soon.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.